Does it matter that Hillary Clinton says he is the best recruiter that ISIS has? He's in videos, and there's no evidence that that is the
Well,
case?
I think it matters. I think the real issue here is that ISIS doesn't need a lot of reason to be attacking us. That's the fact. They're going to be doing that regardless. But I think Hillary does take this as a way to deflect away from the decisions that are made by this administration that have allowed for ISIS to become this very important terrorist group in the country today. So, and you hear Hillary actually, going after the president, that he didn't do enough, he did it wrong, and I thought that was one of the real interesting moments in the debate last night when Hillary basically took in after the president on not having done enough to attack ISIS.
Look, I should say I think Hillary had a very good debate, and you don't have to take it from me. I think a lot of people across the aisle thought she did really well in the debate, so I think that's an important point to make. On the issue of ISIS, I think the reality here is that we have national security experts who focus on social media who are saying that Donald Trump's rhetoric is exactly what ISIS wants, that they are using the rhetoric around recruitment. Whether there's a video or not, the ultimate point is that our own national security experts think it helps ISIS to divide the United States as a country at war with Islam. And George W. Bush made this point himself when he said after 9/11.
Sure, but Bill, is it not fair to say, okay, Donald Trump's rhetoric notwithstanding, which do you think has created more terrorists? What Donald Trump has said, or Hillary Clinton's military actions in Libya, or the war in Iraq that Hillary Clinton voted for? Which do you think created more terrorism?
Well, I don't think
Feel free to dodge the question.
Yeah, I don't think that you could actually enumerate which one created more terrorism.
You probably could.
But I mean,
the
notion that Donald Trump's rhetoric is dangerous is a fact. And whether or not they're making videos now or using the videos later, what he is saying is dangerous. He is a guy who should not be anywhere close to the button. But the whole point about Donald Trump is that it doesn't matter, right? Voters are so angry that he can say what he wants to about keeping Muslims out of the country. He can say what he wants to about Putin. But his supporters are driven by their anger at a system that, as the economy gets better, their life is actually getting worse. And, but his words have consequences, and I think that that's worth noting.
It's hard when you can't run on the policies of the past 7 years to try and come up with new ideas. And the fact that when somebody says that we're right where we need to be, like she said,
with ISIS,
that is very concerning because we're not where we need to be. I don't think there is an American that feels like ISIS is actually more contained. They're actually vulnerable. They feel vulnerable and they feel concerned. So to say that actually means that you're not in touch with what people are feeling on the ground. And that's a problem.
Okay, I think the national security debate, actually, I look forward to a national security debate. If you look at what Hillary said yesterday in the general election, and I think Hillary was very strong in the national security debate yesterday and answered these questions. And when she talked about where we are, she was obviously referring to the UN resolution, which is a step forward. Now, I realize that we would like to say that everything is a disaster. If you listen to the Republican debate, it spews fear and hatred. And I think the issue is, Hillary Clinton is talking about the resolve of the country and is addressing the finer points of national security, and I think she'll be strong in the general.
On the subject of if she gets the nomination.
If she gets the nomination. If she gets it, for sure.
Governor Perry, now that you're out of public life, there's a question I've always wanted to ask you. When you were running for president and when you were governor, anytime I asked you, you're a veteran, does that give you a special understanding of being commander-in-chief that the other candidates, none of whom, with the exception of Lindsey Graham, are veterans? And you always say no, you're very modest about it. Now you can be honest with us.
Well, I think it does matter that you have the experience. I mean, experience in life is really important. What I think with these candidates that we're looking at today, who's going to bring in the experience? And I think that's the real challenge for the nominee of the Republican side. Is who's going to bring in that experience. Hillary's got a record. I mean, Hillary's got the record, and she's going to have to stand up and defend what she said about ISIS last night. She's going to have to defend what she did in Benghazi. She's going to have to defend all of these decisions that she's made. The Republican nominee, whoever that individual is going to be, is going to bring in a group of really capable men and women that I think reflect that knowledge about what veterans need. I mean, one of the great great
gotta go.
failures of this president's been on the veteran side of things, and I'm telling you, Barack Obama I think the Democrat Party is going to have a lot of answers that they're going to have to give